Okay, everyone, we're back in about 2 minutes.
All right, Aaron, whenever you're ready, we can do a roll call again.
Thank you. Chair Moreno, present. Councilman Giarrusso, present. Councilmember Banks, present. Councilmember Brosette is connecting his audio. Councilmember Glapion. Council members, we have 3 members. We have a quorum.
Okay, perfect. And soon we'll have Councilman Brosette too, so we'll have 4. Okay, let me begin with the approval of the minutes. I'll make a motion to approve. Can I get a second? I see
Second.
Joe trying to
Second, sorry.
It's okay. Seconded by Councilmember Giarrusso. Any opposition to the approval of the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Okay, so that takes us to agenda item number 3. It's resolution 21-180, pension expenses. The committee will consider a resolution to allow Entergy New Orleans to defer pension expenses. Aaron, I think you're presenting this one.
Council member, I'm available, and so is Joe Rogers, our technical advisors, if you have any questions. This is simply allowing Entergy New Orleans to defer the pension costs that they've incurred with employees retiring early, and it'll be considered for cost recovery as part of the EFRP, which will be filed later this summer.
But I think the big important piece about this is at the end of the day, this leads to cost savings for our ratepayers.
Yes, it'll defer those costs and allow us to make sure that it has the least amount of rate impact.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions from the dais? I see none. Are there any public comments on this one, Aaron? No public comments on this one. Okay, I will make a motion to approve the pension expenses resolution. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Giarrusso. Any opposition? All right, hearing none. Item number 3 moves on to the full council. Item number 4, gas hedging. The committee will consider a resolution authorizing Entergy New Orleans to implement its gas hedging program for the 2021-2022 winter season. Joe, I think you're presenting this one. Is that correct? You're on. There you go.
I can. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties with my mouse. Yes, this is essentially a resolution to continue ENO's gas hedging practices, where they enter into contracts to hedge up to 25% of last year's winter heating season gas volumes. Essentially, what it allows them to do is they take financial contracts in the summer months for gas for the winter heating months, which are primarily November through March. And by entering into these contracts, they fix essentially a portion of the gas price going forward for the ratepayers with respect to ratepayers that utilize gas. This isn't related to electricity usage. It's related to gas usage. The hedging results can result in a gain or a loss, but ultimately they decrease the volatility of the price of gas going forward. So I believe this would be appropriate to let them continue to do their hedging practices as they have in the past.
And I'm so happy that you brought up this was just for gas and not for the electricity portion of a bill, because we did have a lot of questions about that when we had the load shedding event. The other piece too, that if you could explain as well, just so that everyone understands, why is it that we don't hedge more than 25%?
It's a decision. Obviously the hedging program, it's limited by the council, and it has been at that level for at least 5-6 years now. The concern is if you since this can result in a loss or a benefit or a loss with respect to hedging prices, if you hedge too much of your gas, it could burden your ratepayers with an extraordinary high cost. So you want to kind of balance how much you're hedging with how much you're protecting. So you could increase that hedging amount. You'd probably want to perform some additional analysis before you did that. But I think this is a fair balance between avoiding excessive costs in the chance that gases take an extreme downward trend versus the upward trend.
Thanks, Joe. Any other questions from the dais? I see none. Aaron, do I have any public comment?
You have one public comment.
Okay.
The comment is from Sandy Rosenthal. She says, pass a mandatory policy and move to net zero emissions by 2040 and absolutely no fossil fuels by 2050. Transition New Orleans energy to the lowest cost resources available, efficiency, solar, and wind. Do not let Entergy water down climate action and renewable policy in the interest of higher profits. Now is the time to focus on proven technologies that are ready to deploy right away. Hold Entergy accountable for the cost and reliability of our energy, including expensive nuclear energy, and use the integrated resource plan to find the cheapest way to meet critical climate goals.
Gotcha. And obviously Ms. Rosenthal's comment was for the next item, which is the RCPS, but now it's been read into the record. And so that one's taken care of for the next item. Real quick, Ms. Spears, Councilmember Glapion is in the waiting room trying to get in. So we've got her. And I think we've got Councilmember Brossette on now as well.
It looks like he's still connecting.
He's still trying to connect. He might have been in the waiting room also.
Oh, no.
No.
Sorry.
At least we're going back into the chamber tomorrow. All right, everyone. So that brings us to...
Councilmember, we need a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to vote. I'll make a motion to approve the gas hedging resolution. Councilmember Druso, can you second that for me?
I'm second. I know you're excited about RCPS.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to moving forward with resolution R21-181 gas hedging? All right, hearing none, that now moves on to the full council. Okay, so now we're on item number 5, R21-182, Renewable and Clean Portfolio Standard. The committee will consider a resolution to establish a renewable and clean portfolio standard for the city of New Orleans. So I'm really excited about today because I really think that today we are making history. We are putting New Orleans on the map as a leader in climate change policy, and not just in the southern portion of this country, but really throughout this country. After 2 years of really hard work, the Renewable and Clean Portfolio Standard under consideration today mandates that Entergy New Orleans begin working toward 100% clean and renewable energy and end carbon emissions from power generation. We call this RCPS, and this is the catalyst for New Orleans' transition away from fossil fueled power generation and towards a clean and resilient future. The RCPS will end Entergy New Orleans carbon emissions by 2050. By 2040, the utility is required to reach 90% clean power and net zero emissions. And let me just really emphasize this again one more time. This is the only standard of its kind in the South and represents one of the swiftest transitions to zero carbon electricity in the entire country. We set out on this path 2 years ago with a singular focus, confronting the generational challenge of global warming and climate change. New Orleans is on the front lines of climate risk, as we recently saw with the storms we've had. Our coast, our economy, and our future depend on our bold action. This council, as direct regulators of Entergy New Orleans, has a unique opportunity to end the utility's emissions on a timeline that is aggressive and yet obtainable. And it's also affordable to our ratepayers. It is action that we must take for a sustainable future. So today, we will take that action. The standard we set today demands that Entergy New Orleans clean up its power generation portfolio and its vast carbon footprint and set a steady course for a grid powered by clean and renewable energy. Power generation nationwide represents an average of almost a third of all carbon emissions. In our corner of the world, the RCPS will cease those emissions. The standard is mandatory. It requires public transparency and reporting so that ratepayers can stay informed and help hold the company accountable. And it caps costs at only 1% of sales a year, guaranteeing New Orleanians can afford the transition that they need and that they deserve. The standard welcomes all types of technologies: solar, wind, geothermal, wave, energy efficiency, demand response, distributed resources, nuclear, and more. And if Entergy New Orleans fails to comply, it carries enforcement penalties that are then directed at emissions reduction projects, whether owned by Entergy or not. As technology evolves or opportunities present themselves, whether it is carbon capture or beneficial electrification, the RCPS does remain flexible. The standard even allows for E&O to prove out a unique project and apply for the council's approval to seek compliance credits. The RCPS is a major change for New Orleans. Our city will be a national leader in confronting climate change and ending emissions from power generation. Our future hangs in the balance. The challenge in front of us is great, but we have built a solution that rises to the occasion. I want to thank all the advocates, the stakeholders, interveners, our team at Curo, our advisors, and Entergy New Orleans for the diligent work that has ultimately led to the crafting of this resolution. Thanks to everyone's work, today we are taking action to secure our future, and there is nothing more important than that. All right, so I believe that Emma, Ms. Hand, are you presenting this presentation today?
I am, and we have a PowerPoint presentation to go with it as well.
Perfect. It's up, and I have to tell you, Ms. Hand, I want to just really just tell you how grateful I am for all of the work that you did on this portfolio standard. I know that it's probably hard to see, but I can hold it up, and I think that people can maybe see it at home. But I mean, this is what it looks like. This is the docket. This is all the work that went into 2 years of working through this. This isn't a simple resolution that's got 2 pages on it. I mean, this took a great deal of work. And really, Emma, I just want to thank you because you were so diligent in it and really leading our advisor team on getting this done and getting it done right. And so I just wanted to just briefly tell you how thankful I am for the work that you did for us.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I have to say a huge chunk of the credit has to go to my fellow advisors, particularly Joe Rogers and Vic Prep and Jay Beatman, who all were, right in the trenches with me on it and working to develop it. And Joe and Vic, especially on the more technical aspects of, how you calculate credits and the like. Just a lot of hard work by the whole team. So thank you for that. And good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So if we're ready to get started, and Aaron, I think we can go to the first page here, or page 2. There we go. So this is just a brief background that just explains a little bit of the activity that's occurred over the last 2 years with the council interacting with the parties and issuing some resolutions along the way to give the parties an indication of where it wanted to go. In addition to this, there were several kind of lengthy stakeholder meetings where a number of the parties got on Zoom calls together in the room together prior to the pandemic, and then on Zoom calls together after the pandemic to work through a lot of the issues and figure out the best path forward for New Orleans. Next slide. This is, just kind of an example of all the parties that were in the docket. The council received 51 sets of comments and letters from over 25 different entities, and just got a couple more yesterday. So there really has been very widespread engagement in the process. And I won't read off each of the individual names here, but just to give everyone a sense of how many different entities participated in this process. So next slide. So basic overview of the structure. It requires 100% net zero carbon emissions resources by 2040 and 100% zero carbon emission resources no later than 2050. Now, by net zero, we mean that to the extent Entergy has any emitting resources left in its portfolio, it has taken measures to offset those resources, which can be through purchasing renewable energy credits, or what we call RECs, on the market, or through other types of measures that gain it an offset that the council would review and approve, something like your EV chargers or other beneficial electrification projects. If Entergy proposes those to the council and approves them, then there would be an offset that would help in reaching net zero carbon emissions. But what's unique about this standard is that we get to 100% zero carbon emissions no later than 2050. So we're going to be weaning the utility off the reliance on offsets and into having a truly clean portfolio by 2050.
And Emma, I know you're going to talk about this more in just a bit, but I think it's really important because I think there's some misinformation out there that somehow we're prohibiting beneficial electrification, which of course is not the case. Beneficial electrification is great, but it's just that if E&O is going to receive a credit under RCPS, that the council would just need to review the projects to see if it would be eligible for the credits, correct?
That's correct. There's nothing in the RCPS that prohibits Entergy from undertaking any kind of activity, other than failing to reach zero emissions by 2050. If there are, and certainly nothing that binds anyone else in the community from doing beneficial electrification projects or anything like that. These rules simply set forth the mechanism by which Entergy can earn credits towards its compliance with the RCPS. So it sets the standards of how much of Entergy's portfolio has to be clean energy resources each year. And it explains how Entergy can comply with that standard, what types of resources it can get credit for towards that. So it does leave a lot of flexibility, as you have noted. We are limiting and phasing out the use of RECs over time. So even at the beginning here, Entergy can only use RECs for a certain portion. I think it starts at 25% and then it phases out over time of its compliance. So, for folks who are concerned that we're just allowing Entergy to offset everything, that's not the case at all. There is some flexibility for Entergy to do that for a portion of its load that diminishes over time. But there is still a very significant requirement that they have actual clean resources in the portfolio. It's a mandatory enforceable standard with reporting requirements so that the council and the public can track how this is going, make sure Entergy is staying on track. And Entergy has to file 3-year compliance plans with the council for approval prior to implementing it. This structure is going to work very similar to the way the Energy Smart program currently works, where Entergy goes through its integrated resource plan process every 3 years and does all of its analysis of what portfolio of resources looks like the best combination of resources to meet the city's needs over the next 30 years. And then in the Energy Smart program, it comes in and it files a 3-year design for the next 3 years of Energy Smart that are based on that IRP analysis. And the way we've set this up, they'll do the same thing with RCPS. So they'll go through that whole IRP analysis, they'll take a look at it, and then they'll develop a plan for the next 3 years of RCPS compliance that's informed by that process. So that Entergy has the analysis of which types of resources are going to be the least cost resources to comply with the RCPS. And that's one of the ways that we are working on making sure that the clean energy solution that we craft for the city is the most reasonable and practical and affordable plan for the city that'll get us there. So then it allows, the RCPS standard allows an array of clean zero carbon emissions resources. So not just renewable energy, but also nuclear power, energy efficiency, demand side management. There's a mechanism as well for energy storage. Not all energy storage is necessarily a clean energy resource. So that one we're also going to do on a case-by-case basis. If Entergy can demonstrate that a particular energy storage project will reduce carbon emissions, is going to be utilized in a way to reduce carbon emissions, then it can get credit for that type of project as well. And as you mentioned, a qualified measure can be beneficial electrification or any other measure that's demonstrated to reduce carbon emissions in Orleans Parish that's cost effective from the utilities perspective and meets the general goals of the RCPS. So Entergy can propose any of those projects to the council, and the council can then review and if it thinks it's appropriate, approve it for Entergy to get RCPS credit for those projects. We do have a higher tier for high priority resources, which are those resources that are directly connected to Entergy's distribution or transmission system. So those are going to be the local projects, whether they're renewable or whether they are kind of demand side management type projects that are directly on Entergy's system and are going to allow Entergy to make use of local resources to help balance the grid and improve reliability. Because Entergy's distribution system is mostly inside Orleans Parish, that also means that it gives a priority to those measures that are inside the city. And so those projects would get a 1.25 compliance credit. So if Entergy were to put in 100 megawatts of those types of projects, or 100 megawatt hours of power, if it got 100 megawatt hours of power from those types of projects, it would get 125 compliance credits from those projects. And that's just to make sure that we do prioritize those high priority resources. Other resources are in tiers that just get a 1.0. We've got a customer protection cost cap that should limit costs to not more than 1% of utility retail sales. So this is really to try to make sure that nobody's bill sees an impact of more than about 1% related to this RCPS. And we think there's a good chance that we can satisfy it without showing an increase in rates. But there is some risk that it could increase rates. And so we've put a cost cap on to make sure that this doesn't get out of control. And if it does, if the expenses start going up and Entergy is not able to comply under the cost cap, that it would come to the council's attention very quickly, and we can look at it and see whether there are any adjustments that need to be made. So if there are years where the utility is not able to comply through reasonable measures, and that could be for any number of things. It could be because there was something weird happening in the market and Entergy just couldn't buy enough renewable power in the market or enough RECs in the market to meet the need. It could be because there was a big weather event, a major hurricane came through or something, and it just threw everything in the city off track. There's a number of reasons that the utility might not be able to comply through measures that are not the utility's fault. And so if that happens, then the utility would make an alternative compliance payment into a clean NOLA fund that the council is setting up. And then that money would be used to promote RCPS compliance. It would be used for RCPS compliance purposes. So it would just be invested in other projects that would be counted towards RCPS compliance. And that is just to make sure that if we get into a situation like that, where the utility hasn't been able to make progress, there's still at least a little money being put aside to try to make this happen. Okay, next slide. So this shows how the requirements ramp up over time. So starting all the way on the left in 2022 would be the first year. You can see that the overall goal is close to 65%, which is what that top green line is. And then the shaded green, the pale green, is what Entergy can accomplish through RECs, through offsets. And the solid green is what Entergy must have in its portfolio, that is clean energy resources that have no emissions. And so you can see this line proceeds steadily over time, increasing until we hit net zero at 2040 and absolute zero emissions at 2050. And you can see also how the percentage of what the utility can satisfy through RECs is also decreasing over time. So next slide. This slide compares the RCPS that's before you today with what other state RPS and clean energy targets look like. And so the New Orleans target is this glowing purple line. And you can see down at the bottom what other states are mapped here. But you can tell from this that we are hitting net zero much earlier than most states. And many states never get to absolute zero. So you can see that this is, in fact, a very aggressive target compared to what other utility regulators and state governments are doing. So next slide. So this slide just illustrates that the council is definitely on trend here. And it's actually even a little bit out of date already. This slide is from the Desire website, which is a website that tracks on a state-by-state basis renewable and clean energy efficiency, energy storage measures that states are taking. And this is the most recent slide that they have done. It's a research project that's undertaken by the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center, which is operated out of NC State University. And they last updated their slide on September of 2020. And there have been even more states that have added clean energy standards since this slide was created. And just to give you a sense, when the council initiated this proceeding in early 2019, in June of 2019, there were 5 states that had a clean energy component to their standards, either a mandatory standard or a voluntary goal. And those were California, Washington, New Mexico, Colorado, and Nevada. By the time this slide was produced in September of 2020, There were 10 states total because New York, Massachusetts, Wisconsin, Connecticut, and New Jersey had all added a clean energy component to their RPS. And sitting here today, there are additional 4 states. So we now have 14 states that have added a clean energy standard to their requirements. And the most recent 4 are Delaware, Maine, Maryland, and Virginia. So we really are seeing a lot of states, just over the last 2 years. California changed theirs in 2018. So just since 2018, you've seen 14 states adopt a clean energy component to their RPS. And so you can really see that this is a trend where a lot of states are really thinking it's important to go. And the other thing that's striking about this map is the Southeast. You can really see that the Southeastern states in particular have been very slow to adopt any kind of RPS or clean energy standard. And so New Orleans really will be a leader in the region with the adoption of this RCPS. Next slide. So this is just a note on the affordability and the need for the customer protection cap. A lot of the states that have adopted a 100% renewables target do have much higher household incomes and also higher retail electric rates than New Orleans does. And that gives us, it's not necessarily cause and effect, but it does indicate that it's something we need to keep an eye on as we move forward with the RCPS and make sure that we are really protecting the New Orleans customers from big increases in their rates that were not intended. And so the blue bars, if you look on the left, the blue bars indicate the average household income. And you can see that New Orleans, all the way over on the right, is the second lowest of the folks who have 100% targets in terms of annual household income. And then the purple bars correspond to the numbers on the right, which is the average retail electric rate per kilowatt hour. And you can see, again, New Orleans is pretty close to the bottom in terms of the average retail electric rate in states that have adopted 100% renewables targets. So that's just an illustration of why that's something that the council wants to keep an eye on as we move forward, making sure that this remains affordable for everybody. So next slide. So this illustrates the starting point, and this is a table that was taken from Entergy's 2018 Integrated Resource Plan filing, the IRP. And what it shows is that really until about 2032, under most scenarios, Entergy has most of the capacity it needs already in its portfolio. And that is with the addition of the projects that the council has already reviewed and approved. So some of those come online. At the time this slide was created, we're coming online between 2019 and about 2021, which is why you see those blue bars very early in the slide kind of ramping up. And then the lines represent what Entergy's need is going to be over time. And so you can see that we're really expecting the next biggest jump in needed capacity to happen around the early 2030s. And that's one of the reasons that we set net zero at 2040, because we figured at that point in time, Entergy would be looking at adding at least one major new resource, and we would want that resource to be clean. So that kind of indicates where and it also explains a little bit why RECs would be phased out over time. We would start out allowing them to use some because we don't really want them to go out and build a bunch of generating facilities that aren't needed for the electricity just to satisfy the RPS, the RCPS. So the combinations of different types of resources that we've allowed, including some use of RECs, energy efficiency and DSM, and other types of projects really will help Entergy get through kind of that first 10 years or so of this program, where they don't need to add major new blocks of capacity, but they do need to satisfy the RPS. And then, as we get further forward in time, kind of after 2030, really looking at what our major new sources of generation are going to be. So next slide. This just explains the tier system that we were talking about a little bit earlier. The 1.25 credit is going to be for resources that are on that distribution system and transmission system and support reliability of the system. Then the tier 2 credit is kind of all of the other renewable and zero carbon resources outside the city that are not directly connected to Entergy's system that count. Entergy just gets a 1-to-1 credit for that. And then tier 3 is for kind of all of our special projects, the electric vehicle charging infrastructure effort, and then any other qualified measure that Entergy proposes to the council and the council reviews and approves. In those proceedings, the council would determine what kind of credit and how to measure the credit Entergy gets for those projects. And then once the council sets how that credit is to be measured and counted, we would just be applying a 1.0 tier 3 credit to those credits. So next slide. Again, affordability we know is extremely important in New Orleans. We know the energy burden is high, and we really wanted to stay focused on making sure that we don't do anything that causes electricity rates to spike up. And so we've allowed a pretty wide variety of types of resources that can be used, which will help Entergy choose the least cost combination of these resources. So demand side management, distributed energy resources, energy efficiency, some energy storage, fuel cells, using renewable energy, geothermal, hydroelectric, nuclear, ocean wave, ocean thermal, solar photovoltaic, solar thermal, tidal current, wind. There's a wide range to choose from. And so Entergy has a lot of different options there. And then we have put in the customer protection cost cap in place as well to make sure that the costs are not more than 1% of the total utility retail sales. And that will help control the bill impact and keep it to something around 1% for most folks. That way, even if it does end up being more expensive than we think, we're able to control that and see it. And if there's a need, the council can step in and make an adjustment. Next slide. Accountability and enforceability. As we've said, it's mandatory, it's enforceable. There are reporting requirements. We're requiring Entergy to maintain a website where it posts its compliance information so that the public can just go to Entergy's website and find the most recent report and download it and read it. If Entergy fails to meet the standard and the council finds that it was imprudent for Entergy to do so, that Entergy could have met it through reasonable measures and Entergy didn't, then the council does still have the ability, as it always does, to impose penalties on Entergy for violating the council's rules. And Entergy cannot pass the cost of those penalties through to customers. As we mentioned before, if Entergy is not able to comply through reasonable measures, even though it has behaved prudently, then it pays an alternative compliance payment into the Clean NOLA Fund at $1 per megawatt hour rate that reflects the shortfall. And this would be limited by the customer cost cap. And those funds would have to be used for projects for RCPS compliance. Those projects don't necessarily have to be owned by Entergy. The council still has to set up the Clean NOLA Fund and establish the criteria for awarding money from it and all that. But under the RCPS rules, at least in theory, the money could go to other local projects as long as the credits, any RECs or CEC credits that are generated are given back to Entergy and then retired for RCPS compliance purposes. So that is the Clean NOLA fund. And then Entergy has to file its 3-year compliance plans with the council for prior approval. So the council will be able to see what Entergy's plans are for the next 3 years to meet the RCPS and approve the plans before Entergy runs out and does it. So there's a lot of ways for the council to be very actively reviewing and being on top of and understanding what Entergy's compliance plans are, so that we can kind of keep track of this as it goes along and make sure that everything is on track and it's performing the way the council wants it to. There is also in the plan that, as you mentioned, Councilmember Moreno, at the beginning of the presentation, the council has the ability to review proposals that don't fit the rules exactly. And if the council finds that that proposal would be consistent with the purposes of the RCPS and that it would benefit customers, the council can make a determination to waive the rules and allow that project to be used for compliance purposes. So, if there's a really good project and it just doesn't quite fit the rules somehow, but it's going to be a great benefit to the city, the council has the ability to approve that and allow Entergy to do it. And we also, just because the technology and the economics and the science in this space is moving so quickly, to make sure that the rules don't get stale over time, there's a provision stating that it is the council's intention to take a look at the rules every 5 years or so, and to take a look also at market developments, technology developments in the economics of the different types of resources, and make sure that the rules are still providing the best result for the city. And, so we'll take a look at it in 5 years and look at how it's been performing, look at everything we know 5 years from now, and the council can make a determination as to whether any adjustments need to be made to the rules at that point in time. And the council, of course, can always reopen it earlier if there's a good reason to do so. But we just have that 5-year trigger to kind of remind everyone to keep looking at this and keep it active and fresh and moving so that it's a living standard, if you will. And I think that is it for the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions from the DS.
I don't really have any questions, but I just really like the flexibility of this plan, because what you just mentioned, Emma, is so true. I mean, we have no idea. I mean, at least I don't, how to even predict what could be coming in the future and could be beneficial to the city. So the fact that it's like we have the ability to adopt different types of projects, to change up the standards should we need to down the road. I mean, I think that's all very positive. As you mentioned, to have this be almost like this is the start, and we can continue to move and evolve and improve as new technologies and types of opportunities emerge. So appreciate that. Any questions from the dais? Let's see. Doesn't look like I've got any questions from the dais. Okay, Aaron, do we have public comment?
Just 80.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to say something, if that's all right.
Sure, go ahead, Councilmember Druso.
Yeah, I mean, Emma, thanks to all of your work, but also, Helena, I heard you thank everybody, the advisors, Curo, the advocates, everybody, but, you and your team deserve credit as well, because this has been a 2-year-long process. And I went back and pulled, the press release that we did from 2 years ago. And it feels like it's been a long time. It hasn't been a long time. And one of the things I talked about was just this commitment to renewable energy and a commitment to action. And today is finally the action being taken. And I think particularly on the heels of yesterday's meeting where we're talking about public safety issues, and I think people hear public safety and they only think police or fire, EMS. Infrastructure is a public safety issue, and we're not going to have a town if we all drown. And as much as we talk about gray infrastructure and green infrastructure, reducing our footprint, to me, is an incredibly important part of that conversation. I think the way that you, Madam Chair, and others have tailored this really helps us get to a really good place on that. And then the other piece I think that shouldn't be ignored is that we've talked a lot as a group about how do we create sort of the incentives and how do we make sure that this actually happens, because you may want change, but in order to get it, people have to feel as though they're getting something in return, right? And New Orleans seems uniquely situated as a hub for oil and gas work to now convert those workers to people who are working in wind and solar and other renewable sources that are right here. And so not only do I see this as an equity issue, but also one that's economic development as well, that we are going to create new jobs for people as a result of this and create a brighter future, not only for our residents, but hopefully as a model, as you already pointed out, for the South as well. So I just wanted to say that, and I appreciate all of your efforts.
Thanks, Councilmember Druso. Well put. Okay, Aaron, you can start with public comment.
Okay, council member, I'll do my best to keep them each to 2 minutes. I have my little timer set.
Okay, perfect. I've got Chris down here too. Chris, will you help her keep time as well? Okay, and Chris is down here to help you also.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, the first comment is from Ann Meyer. She does not represent anyone. She says the renewable and clean energy is vital for survival of our city and our planet. Thank you for taking steps forward on this subject. Please consider removing approval of nuclear energy. We do not have safe storage systems for this type of energy production. Thank you. The next comment is from Peter Tigray, representing Climate Reality Project New Orleans, Louisiana chapter. He is not a paid representative. The Climate Reality Project New Orleans chapter thanks the Utility Committee for their excellent work in developing the renewable and clean portfolio standard requirements. Although we would appreciate additional plans to end our dependence on expensive nuclear energy, the RCPS is a vital step forward in protecting our air, water, earth, and very existence as a city and as human beings. We are hopeful that the council's good work will be a model for other cities and inspire continued action. Peter Tigray, Chair, Climate Reality, New Orleans. The next comment is from Kathy Larimer. She is not a paid representative. Let's make New Orleans a leader in renewable and clean energy. We will be a beneficiary with fewer storms, a cleaner environment, and less costly energy. As an area embedded in fossil fuels, let's create new energy resources that will take up into the future without delay. Deborah Campbell, not a paid representative. Let's make New Orleans a leader in renewable and clean energy. We will be a beneficiary with fewer storms. Oh, sorry. Deborah Campbell, we support clean energy without dangerous nuclear energy. Beth Butler, clean energy without nuclear is the future. Please support it. Bernard Gust, representing the Carrollton Riverbend Neighborhood Association, not a paid representative. With all of our power plants coming to the end of their useful life, please replace them with renewable options. From Elena Leda, I support a non-nuclear standard. Thank you for all your work on this. It is important, not the least for environmental justice. From Shannon Rainey, representing the residents of Gordon Plaza. I support the standard without nuclear energy. Thomas Beller, I support the council's renewable and clean portfolio standard without nuclear energy. Brent Newman, representing the National Audubon Society. He is a paid representative. Audubon Delta is the regional office of the National Audubon Society, including the state of Louisiana. We would like to express our support of the revised RCPS regulations. Through our participation in the Energy Future New Orleans Coalition and other energy policy throughout the region, we have been supportive of policies and procedures that encourage greater energy efficiency, cleaner energy sources, economic development, and a more equitable approach to energy policy. These implementing regulations as amended will meet these objectives. The council has plenty of opportunities to build a cleaner, more equitable, and more resilient New Orleans through a more critical and comprehensive approach to the current integrated resource planning process. Through the enactment of the Renewable Portfolio Standard and through an honest and critical assessment of the energy generation portfolio of Entergy and the associated costs for New Orleanians, the Council has demonstrated leadership and accountability over recent months in regulation of Entergy, and the intent to hold the utility to a higher standard for New Orleanians is clear. We look forward to the adoption of these regulations and a continued work with the Council to ensure that New Orleans is a great place for people and birds for years to come. Nathaniel Rich. I urge the City Council to pass mandatory policy that will commit New Orleans to net zero emissions by 2040 at the latest, with a total ban on fossil fuels by 2050. It will be crucial in our transition to a renewable energy portfolio to block Entergy from thwarting our efforts to do so. Entergy must be forced, at the very least, to close all of its existing natural gas plants within the next 2 decades, and must commit to building no new fossil fuel energy facilities. Since New Orleans is one of the cities most imperiled by climate change in the world, it would be absolute folly to refuse to do our part to limit greenhouse gas emissions as aggressively as possible. Why should any other city, state, or federal government offer to help us manage our future climate misfortunes if we cannot show that we ourselves take seriously the existential dangers to our city? From Cynthia Sarthau. She represents someone but did not say who else. New Orleans needs a mandatory policy on renewable energy that will move us to net zero emissions by 2040. As temperatures rise, it is important that the city transition our energy to the lowest cost resources available: efficiency, solar, and wind. Additionally, the city must ensure that Entergy does not water down climate action and renewable policy in the interest of higher profits. Now is the time to focus on proven technologies that are ready to deploy right away. Hold Entergy accountable for the cost and reliability of our energy, including expensive nuclear energy, and use the integrated resource plan to find the cheapest way to meet critical climate goals. Juliana D. Paget. Thank you for the vision to move forward with the renewable and clean portfolio standard. While I support the RPS overall, I strongly encourage the Council not to allow nuclear as a renewable or clean power source. As we all know, nuclear is neither. Entergy should not receive credit for nuclear power. Please require them to use the increasing renewable resources that are available to us. Caroline Center. Please pass mandatory policy for renewable energy, not including nuclear. My brother lives in North Carolina and they have had standards for 20 years. Listen to the science. Musa Eubanks. Please support the renewable and clean portfolio standard. We must stop the use of fossil fuels if we want any future for ourselves, our children, and our planet. Sean Moses Englum, representing First Grace, not a paid representative. Please pass this inspiring policy that says we care more about our children than lobbyists. Kelsey Chapman, representing herself. I strongly support a just transition away from fossil fuels and towards a renewable and clean energy portfolio for New Orleans, Louisiana, and the rest of the state and nation. This is work that could make New Orleans an economic powerhouse and example of environmental justice leadership to the rest of the world. Hetty Broussard. I support renewable energy for New Orleans. We must do all that we can to protect the environment and save it for future generations. Clean energy is one step in the right direction. Leah Foster. Pass a mandatory policy and move to net zero emissions by 2040 and absolutely no fossil fuels by 2050. Transition New Orleans energy to the lowest cost resource available: efficiency, solar, and wind. Do not let Entergy water down climate action and renewable policy in the interest of higher profits. Now is the time to focus on proven technologies that are ready to deploy right away. Hold Entergy accountable for the cost and reliability of our energy, including expensive nuclear energy, and use the integrated resource plan to find the cheapest way to meet critical climate goals. Kenitra Caston Hill. Pass a mandatory policy and move to net zero emissions by 2040, and absolutely no fossil fuels by 2050. Transition New Orleans energy to the lowest cost resource available: efficiency, solar, and wind. Do not let Entergy water down climate action and renewable policy in the interest of higher profits. Taylor Hodge. We need real renewable energy investment in New Orleans, not carbon capture and other unproven technology. We need to pass a mandatory policy and move to net zero emissions by 2040 and absolutely no fossil fuels by 2050. Transition New Orleans energy to the lowest cost resource available, efficiency, solar, and wind. Do not let Entergy water down climate action and renewable policy in the interest of higher profits. Now is the time to focus on proven technologies that are ready to deploy right away. Hold Entergy accountable for the cost and reliability of our energy, including expensive nuclear energy, and use the integrated resource plan to find the cheapest way to meet critical climate goals. Julie Schwam-Harris. I value the work the City Council is doing and believe in your good intentions. However, we must push harder to achieve what I believe is our mutual goal, to have it sooner and be cleaner. Please make New Orleans a 100% renewable city by 2040 by using solar and wind. Please do not allow nuclear in the renewable portfolio standard. Nuclear is costly, not renewable, and leaves behind hazardous radioactive waste. We can do better with your focus and your push to do so. Logan O'Neill. Pass a mandatory policy and move to net zero emissions by 2040 and absolutely no fossil fuels by 2050. Transition New Orleans energy to the lowest cost resources available, energy efficiency, solar, and wind. Do not let Entergy water down climate action and renewable policy in the interest of higher profits. Jara Wise and Clinton Hill have the same comment as Logan O'Neill. Elizabeth Gallant, representing Posigen Solar. She is a paid representative. Posigen was founded almost 10 years ago, remains based in New Orleans, and employs more than 200 Louisiana residents. Posigen is the nationally recognized leader in low-income EJ rooftop solar. Posigen is excited to see the council commit to 100% clean energy for New Orleans, which is vital to our city's climate resilience and future economic viability. We are pleased that the standard does not contain expensive, unsafe, and unproven measures such as nuclear electrification and carbon capture. Posigen is particularly excited about the commitment to local clean energy that will increase over time, given that rooftop solar creates 30 times more jobs than utility scale solar, as well as creating far greater resiliency to grid failures and extreme weather events. Posigen hopes that the council will work to significantly increase support for rooftop solar in the coming year, as DOE studies show that 39% of New Orleans energy needs could be supplied by just local solar. Posigen is the national leader in low-income EJ Solar Plus energy efficiency access. And we could dramatically reduce energy poverty in our city while returning New Orleans to the top 10 list for solar per capita with dedicated council support. Thank you again for taking this exciting and vital step forward. Robert Edwards, representing his community. New Orleans should help our state become a leader in renewable energy by encouraging companies involved in that field. There are many different types of companies involved in renewable energy, and they can help our economies. Thank you. Susan Sakish. I commend the council for addressing plans to make New Orleans a 100% renewable energy city by 2040, so long as the plan does not include nuclear options. The draft RPS currently as presented falls short of this goal. We recommend approval by the City Council without nuclear. Sandy Rosenthal, this was the comment read earlier. Ben H. Gordon. To all New Orleans City Council members, I implore all of you to take the Integrated Resource Plan very seriously when considering the city's future in energy generation and use. If we all take global climate change seriously, then we must transition to low-cost wind, solar, and other forms of renewable energy. Louisiana is behind many other states in the vision of lowering emissions to zero by 2024 and breaking away from fossil fuels by 2050. Don't let Entergy water down the transition IRP. Keep to the IRP goals of transition. Nuclear energy may not contribute to greenhouse gases directly, but the radioactive waste is with us for generations with no safe place to put it. Carbon capture has its own delayed problems, which I am sure you are aware of. Please help all of us take the challenge seriously for future generations. Ben Gordon. John Graubarth. Stop Entergy's plans. Chad Pellerin. So happy the council is considering this move to institute measures to require clean air. I'll be dead by then, but I'm all for it. Elizabeth Lees Hopkins. Please adopt this renewable and clean energy portfolio for our city. The world knows this is an issue. We are at risk. Let's lead and save our city. Liz Davey, from representing Tulane University. Yes, she is a paid representative. On behalf of Tulane University, I commend the council staff, and participants in the development of the proposed renewable and clean portfolio standard for New Orleans. The proposed policy is a major action to address climate change, carefully tailored to hold down costs and foster opportunity within New Orleans. The goals of this policy are both ambitious and attainable, and they model the kind of forward thinking that is needed to solve the great challenge of climate change. Young people are looking to us to respond to climate change with actions that meet the scale of the problem. This is such an action. As director of the Office of Sustainability at Tulane University, I work on the university's efforts to address climate change by reducing the greenhouse gas emissions that result from university activities. The largest part of these emissions come from the electricity we purchase. This legislation will reduce those emissions every year, reaching zero in 2040. In other words, this legislation means that turning on a light or running an air conditioner in New Orleans will have a smaller impact on climate change each year. By 2040, the electricity we use every day will not be adding to global warming. The legislation is in line with the scale of reductions called for by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the global networks of scientists who advise countries on the state of the climate. Importantly, they have advised that global carbon dioxide emissions must be net zero by 2050 in order to hold off catastrophic levels of global warming. And they have advised that we must begin large-scale reductions now, cutting emissions in half by 2030. This legislation reduction goals in line with those targets. It provides incentives for local renewable energy and energy efficiency projects, but also provides flexibility so Entergy can meet the emissions reductions goals in the lowest cost ways. I urge you to pass the draft renewable and clean portfolio standard. Pam Nath. I support the draft renewable portfolio standard without nuclear. It is critical that New Orleans move toward being a 100% renewable city, and this will only happen with a mandatory RPS. Nuclear energy is not renewable and creates hazardous radioactive waste. In addition, including nuclear energy in the draft RPS goes against City Council's own federal complaint, which demands Entergy refund $1 billion charged to customers for frequent malfunction costs at Grand Gulf. Timothy David Ray, representing the New Orleans Coalition. The New Orleans Coalition applauds the New Orleans City Council's important effort to take action on climate change, which requires moving forward to a renewable energy future. We ask the council to, 1, pass a mandatory policy that moves to net zero emissions by 2040 and zero carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. 2, transition New Orleans energy to the lowest cost resources available, and efficiency, solar, and wind. 3, monitor the value of offsets and progress toward goals on a regular basis. 4, deploy proven technologies that are ready to deploy right away. And 5, use the integrated resource plan to find the cheapest way to meet critical climate goals. Jeff LeBlanc. 1, pass a mandatory policy and move to net zero emissions by 2040 and absolutely no fossil fuels by 2050. 2, transition New Orleans energy to the lowest cost resource available, efficiency, solar, and wind. 3, do not let Entergy water down climate action and renewable policy in the interest of selling more electricity. 4, now is the time to focus on proven technologies that are ready to deploy right away. 5, nuclear energy is fine. Robert Lee. I'm a resident of New Orleans. I'm speaking today in support of a renewable portfolio standard for our city. This policy will make our electricity rates more affordable by creating investment in renewable and efficiency resources that are in many cases cheaper than fossil fuel generation. In addition, it will make our community healthier and more resilient by cutting emissions of carbon dioxide and other pollutants, and by diversifying our energy portfolio to eliminate our dependence on polluting energy. Finally, a renewable and clean portfolio standard will create new quality jobs and economic investment in our community. New Orleans is poised to be a leader in a new energy economy, and I hope that you will vote today to adopt a renewable and clean portfolio standard and ensure Entergy uses their stakeholder energy planning process to find the best way forward for New Orleanians. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Ava Warner. I am a resident of New Orleans. I am speaking today in support of a renewable portfolio standard for our city. This policy will make our electricity rates more affordable by creating investment in renewable and efficiency resources that are in many cases cheaper than fossil fuel generation. In addition, it will make our community healthier and more resilient by cutting emissions of carbon dioxide and other pollutants, and by diversifying our energy portfolio to eliminate our dependence on polluting energy. Finally, a renewable and clean portfolio standard will create quality jobs and economic investment in our community. New Orleans is poised to be a leader in a new energy economy, and I hope that you will vote today to adopt a renewable and clean portfolio standard and ensure Entergy uses their stakeholder energy planning process to find the best way forward for New Orleanians. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Trey Payton is submitting a comment that is the same as the previous two comments, as is Linnea O'Neill. Michael Brown, Alliance for Affordable Energy Board Member. I strongly encourage the council to adopt a mandatory policy and move to net zero emissions by 2040 and absolutely no fossil fuels by 2050. The council should prioritize efficiency and low-cost solar and wind, which benefit our communities and lower rates and healthier air quality. The council must center the needs of Black, Brown, AAPI, and low-income New Orleanians in its RPS, as these communities are too often overcharged and overpolluted by our current energy system. The council should not allow Entergy New Orleans to continue to invest in costly, toxic, and outdated nuclear power and oil and gas. This is the best way to deliver on climate, protect New Orleanians, many of whom suffer from extreme energy burden and are at the forefront of climate justice struggles, and ensure we're investing in the solutions of the future. The brutal winter storms of 2021 show the peril of focusing on propping up profits rather than investing in our own homes and energy systems, so they are built to last. Thank you for your time and consideration. Eleni Salinger. As a resident of New Orleans, I am writing in support of a renewable portfolio standard for our city. This policy is an opportunity for New Orleans to be a leader in making the necessary transition away from fossil fuels and towards clean energy. This policy will make our electricity rates more affordable by creating investment in renewable and efficiency resources that are in many cases cheaper than fossil fuel generation. It will make our community healthier and more resilient by cutting emissions of carbon dioxide and other pollutants that our people breathe, and by diversifying our energy portfolio to eventually eliminate our dependence on fossil fuels. Finally, a renewable and clean portfolio standard will create new quality jobs and economic investment in our community. New Orleans is poised to be a leader in a new energy economy, and I hope that you will vote today to adopt a renewable and clean portfolio standard and ensure Entergy is held accountable to use their stakeholder energy planning process to find the best way forward to New Orleanians. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Maria Mascas is submitting the same comment as Eleni Salinger. Ariane Levades. I support the standard that requires by the year 2045 that all electricity supplied by Entergy comes from energy that does not add to the climate crisis. I support the standard without nuclear energy. Andy Kowalczyk, representing 350 New Orleans, he is not a paid representative. Good morning, Council. I want to express that I truly appreciate the efforts on behalf of the council staff, advocates, members of the public, and stakeholders who have been active throughout the process of developing the Gulf South's first clean energy standard. Although this process has evolved from a petition from 36 members of the community to a resolution to establish a roadmap for a renewable portfolio standard nearly 3 years ago, it is commendable that the city established the goal set forth in the proposals that's been set forth. Based on Resolution 2104 passed in April of last year, I bring up the roots of the resolution for an RPS in New Orleans was because of a lack of meaningful climate action coming from Entergy New Orleans. Despite the promises coming from the company, promises are cheap for a subsidiary of an investor-owned utility that has as much market power as Entergy Corporation. But that's why public policy is important. And that's why climate action from the City Council is important. We can't rely on corporations to set policy, and depending on them for advice on how to avert climate catastrophe is irresponsible at best and a threat to the future generations of the city at worst. It's not just about the climate, though. It's about the integrity of the process. It's about public policy that comes from citizens' voices instead of corporate donors and trade groups that are solicited to sign on to a multi-million-dollar corporation's bid to sell more electricity and call it climate action. The goal to electrify everything must be accompanied with swift decarbonization of the power sector, and that's science. I'm fully in support of science, and there are no multipliers accounted for in limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. If there was ever a clearer example of greenwashing that existed before including beneficial electrification as a credit towards a clean energy, like what was in the RCPS previously, has been upstaged. That was 2 minutes. Colin Salinger, he is submitting the same comment as Maria Moscas and previous commenters, as is Jillian Poche. Ben Miller, I'm writing to thank you for the support of a renewable and clean portfolio standard without nuclear. I strongly support the commitment to a responsible future for our great city. As we have already seen the effects of climate crisis, any effort to reduce our impact and take steps toward a cleaner energy portfolio is much needed. Thank you for taking action to ensure New Orleans' future. Siobhan Foley. With President Biden's goal to move the nation to a carbon-free power sector by 2035 and net zero emissions by a net zero emissions economy by 2050, now is the time for this council to stand tall for the city's future. Renewable portfolio standards are proven tools that put more clean energy on the grid and help electric utilities transition, and they are usually only the domain of the state, with mandatory standards in 30 states nationwide. New Orleans is one of only 2 cities empowered to take this crucial regulatory action to support its own goals, and the only other city with this power, Washington, D.C., established a mandate in January 2019 for 100% renewable electricity by 2032, to include 5% from local solar. This docket opened just 4 months later in May 2019. Now, 2 years later, please put an end to the delays and pass a mandatory policy to move the city's electricity to net zero emissions no later than 2040 and rid the grid of fossil fuels by 2050. The global economy is moving this way at pace to respond to the climate emergency, while energy moves as slowly as you will allow, sucking as much profit as they can from ratepayers, also known as all of us who pay utility bills, investing in old polluting standbys before time runs out, such as NOPS. Today, please show them that our community knows better and tell them that their time is up for making short bets on our city's future for lazy earnings today. Do not let Entergy water down clean energy policy in the interest of higher profits, and hold them accountable for the cost, reliability, and quality of the energy they provide to this community, especially the nuclear that has been so unreliable and costly lately and is such a critical component of our carbon-free power mix. Thank you in advance for your leadership on this. Elizabeth Soychak. Dear City Council members, thank you for moving forward with a plan that prioritizes renewable energy for New Orleans. We are in a great position to take advantage of solar and wind energy that will get us to zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, as the International Energy Agency has just urged all governments to do. In these next few critical years, please hold Entergy accountable for what they are charged with and reject overpriced nuclear power with its radioactive waste as a clean solution to climate crisis. Technology and public support are on your side, and now New Orleans will step into the 21st century. Darlene Jones, representing VOTE and Justice and Beyond. She is not a paid representative. After the disaster in Texas and the debacle at the Colonial Pipeline, I fully support the Renewable and Clean Portfolio Standard. Fossil fuels time is up. Thank you. Eric Bazan, do not want nuclear energy. Lucille Stand, please remove nuclear energy from the Renewable and Clean Portfolio Standard. Adam Davis, the US must move to net zero emissions by 2040 and no fossil fuels by 2050. Louisiana needs to be at the forefront of this and stop using carbon capture as an option to evade proven methods. We pass a mandatory statewide policy. Our utilities must be held to a high requirement for efficiency, sustainability, and reliability now, not in a few years. Please use this time to utilize integrated resource plans and identify the boldest plan for statewide mandatory actions starting now, not kicking the can down the road for a few more years. Hannah Chelu. Thank you to the chair and to the committee for your time this morning. My name is Hannah Chelu, and I am a resident of New Orleans. I'm speaking today in support of a renewable portfolio standard without nuclear for our city. This policy will make our rates more affordable while also making our community and environment healthier. We live in a city and state where we can already see the effects of climate change. It's important for our future to embrace the mandatory renewables portfolio standard, and it's also an opportunity for our city to become a leader in the transition to a new energy economy. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Marion Penny Braystad. My compensation is being able to exercise my First Amendment rights to freedom of expression. Honorable City Council members, thank you very much for your very difficult service to the city and the community. Thank you also for forwarding the RPS proposal and working on it for more than 2 years. I am writing in support of the RPS ordinance. I appreciate that the red line removed CCUS and beneficial electrification. Please vote for the ordinance. Nevertheless, the current ordinance is not perfect. So if any changes are made, I'd like to see 1, ensure that it is mandatory, not optional. 2, retain net zero by 2040 and no fossil fuels by 2050. 3, remove nuclear. Nuclear is not renewable since uranium must be mined and is a non-renewable resource. 4, moreover, existing nuclear plants that are used by Entergy are much more expensive than renewables. Part of the commitment of the RPS is to provide affordable energy for our residents who suffer from a very high energy burden. Also, the council is currently in litigation about Grand Gulf over excess and potentially imprudent cost of Grand Gulf. Thank you. Marion Penny Braystad, PhD, MBA. Tom Hain. Superstorms, rising seas, hotter days, solar, wind, and wave energy are all options that need to be developed. The time was yesterday to take steps. While solar energy and electric cars are 2 of the easiest ways for individuals to take small steps that add up, major investments in technologies to harness wind, wave, and solar energy needs to continue. If anyone thinks the cost is too high, they are not thinking long-term. The longer we wait, the worse the problem will be. Christine Casanova. Keep nuclear energy out of our region. Support sustainable green energy by 2040. Sarah Miller. As a resident of New Orleans, I am writing in support of a renewable and clean portfolio standard, a renewable portfolio standard for our city. I'm concerned about the impact environmental changes are having on our city and state, and we must act to maintain our beautiful city. While a multi-pronged approach is necessary, reducing pollution and waste, building better infrastructure, and holding companies accountable for their environmental impact are necessary to maintain our environmental stability, our environment and ability to live comfortably in our city. While 2050 seems a long way from now, the urgency of the situation cannot be overstated. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Robert Casanova, let's keep it clean. I support clean energy. Viola Washington, representing Welfare Rights Organization. I support the standard without nuclear energy. Pepper Roussel. There is no reason New Orleans can't transition to low-cost renewable energy, and there is every reason that we should. The 2021 winter storms that caused rolling blackouts across the city, heavy rain that causes outages, an unusually active hurricane season predicted are evidence enough that Entergy need not be the only answer. Climate change is real. Now is the time to begin a shift to protect ourselves from very real energy-related repercussions. Staying the current course will have very real and likely severe consequences for residents. We have to do better. Beverly Wright, representing the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, of which she is the executive director. The City Council should approve the resolution establishing the renewable portfolio standard without nuclear energy. For too long, using electricity in New Orleans has meant high bills and high levels of power plant pollution, harming our communities and warming our planet. On yesterday, the world received an urgent warning by the International Energy Agency to end new investments in fossil fuels now in order to meet climate action goals. We appreciate the work by council members in developing the standard that requires Entergy to eliminate the use of coal, oil, and gas by the year 2050. Central to the standard are renewable solar and wind energy that are not only the cheapest and cleanest sources of electricity, but are driving new job creation with higher than average wages. However, we are opposed to the inclusion of Entergy's Grand Gulf nuclear plant in the standard. Nuclear energy is not renewable. It creates hazardous radioactive waste. As you know, 30 states and 3 US territories have established renewable portfolio standards. A growing number are revising their standard to ensure equity. We call on the council to do likewise. This would begin with acknowledging the fact that Black and Indigenous communities are the dumping grounds for radioactive waste from Entergy's Grand Gulf nuclear plant. The exorbitant costs Entergy charges for this nuclear energy, along with its poor plant management, including $1 billion in cost overruns, add to the financial hardship and housing crisis in New Orleans. The City Council should approve the renewable portfolio standard without nuclear energy. We should not be hobbled by Grand Gulf as we take steps toward an energy future that is equitable and sustainable. Logan Burke, representing the Alliance for Affordable Energy, of which he is staff. Yesterday, the International Energy Agency recommended an immediate move away from polluting and carbon emitting resources to those that can sustain life. It is time to stop throwing fossil fuels on this fire. There is zero time to waste, and this council has extraordinary authority to take action for the city and people you represent. Here in New Orleans, thousands have signed petitions and hundreds have taken part in symposia, neighborhood meetings, and online town halls to envision a fully efficient and renewable future. Fortunately, the tools needed to stop pollution from the power sector are ready to deploy today and are the cheapest energy available. This policy is a crucial step in the race toward different energy future, and the Alliance is committed to the next step to plan for energy everyone can afford. We also know this step alone won't take us across the finish line, especially for New Orleanians who are struggling to pay bills in a city that is increasingly vulnerable to outages year-round. To meet the needs of our city, we must pair this policy with honest assessment of the costs of nuclear plants like Grand Gulf. We urge the council to require Entergy to compare the cost of existing plants against the cost of new efficiency and renewables in the IRP. We must also plan for a homegrown energy system that helps residents stay safe in their homes during and after extreme weather and can build a different kind of energy economy. We appreciate this council's action to remove some of the false solutions that simply don't belong in a renewable portfolio standard like CCUS. We hope other cities and states in the region listen to their people calling for a renewable, equitable, affordable, and livable Gulf South. Bob Morrell. Thank you for the work done to make sure our city stops its reliance on fossil fuels. Please do not include carbon capture and expand nuclear in this portfolio. Neither are clean, nor is it adequate to scale well. Renewables, please. Dee Dee Green, representing the Holly Grove Neighbors Association. Holly Grove Neighbors Association, Inc. supports a greener city that promotes better quality of life for all New Orleanians. It is imperative that the council supports climate resilience, not degradation, by adopting a renewable portfolio standard for New Orleans without nuclear energy. Grace Treffinger. I am writing as a concerned New Orleanian to let the City Council know that I support a renewable portfolio standard without nuclear energy or carbon capture sequestration. We need a renewable and efficient energy future that does not include false solutions like nuclear and CCUS. Please consider the clock we are running against. The climate crisis is already here, and you have a role to play in combating it. This decision is critical for the future of our home. It is time to pass a renewable portfolio standard that does not include nuclear or carbon capture and only includes truly clean energy such as wind and solar. George Bond. We need to transition from oil-based energy to renewables. We need to make household solar power a reality. Setting a portfolio standard is a way of putting our money where our mouth is and is a good thing. Holly Grow, MD. The children and citizens, representing the children and citizens of New Orleans, not a paid representative. Dear Council, as a medical doctor, mother of 4, and health advocate for the health of our community, I have written to each of you on the Council about my sincerest concerns about your placement of the 5G towers on top of nearby 2 and 3G towers around the citizens, especially children of our city. Again, the FCC based the safeness of this technology on thermal readings. The biological changes of the cells and organs are profound. Please form a health unit to look into the real science, free of the money trail from the industry. In the meantime, investigate and stop the 5Gs from being around the humans in our city. Sincerely, Holly Grow, MD. Melissa Marshall. Dear council members, our kids can't vote, but they need your representation today. Climate change is the biggest threat to their future, more so here in New Orleans than most anywhere else. Their well-being and prosperity depends on the actions we take today on their behalf. Please be on the right side of history by passing the most aggressive possible carbon emissions policy. We only have one shot to do this right now, and you guys happen to be the ones with the power to do it. Please take your responsibility with the gravity it deserves. Thank you. Jolie Benson. I'm wishing to discuss regarding telecommunications and the careless placement of cell phone towers next to schools and playgrounds. In order to protect our kids needs to be created 500 feet from all schools and playgrounds. Angel Bradford, representing herself and Sierra Club Delta chapter, not a paid representative. I want a strong RCPS, and we need to ensure that this RCPS will be mandatory, not include nuclear, and focus on zero, not net zero emissions. Jane Patton, representing No Waste Louisiana, not a paid representative. Dear committee, as an organization led by lifelong multi-generational Louisiana residents, No Waste Louisiana commends the New Orleans City Council for taking proactive, ambitious action to mitigate the harms we all experience from climate change. It is imperative that we work as quickly and aggressively as possible to protect the people, lands, and waters of our city. However, we are concerned about some details of what is currently included in the definition of clean or renewable, and we strongly advise the council to strike these options from the standard, focusing instead only on truly renewable energy sources, efficiency, and a full-scale transition from fossil fuels. Carbon capture, utilization, and storage, CCUS technologies do not contribute to a phase out of fossil fuels, and they do not fully address carbon emissions. Princeton University's Net Zero America plan clearly states that only 15% of carbon emissions could be addressed through CCUS, and only if a massive infrastructure for carbon movement and storage is built out, largely in Louisiana and at a public expense. Instead, CCUS perpetuates fossil fuel dependency, counter to the intentions of the adoption of a RCPS. New Orleans people, environment, and economy will suffer debilitating harm if this focus on CCUS is allowed to continue. Waste to energy, burning or processing solid waste for energy production, as mentioned on page 29 of the resolution, is not in any way a renewable source of energy, since much of our city's solid waste is made of plastics and other petrochemical materials. Burning those materials for energy is still perpetuating fossil fuel dependence. Further, this waste processing is expensive and inefficient, using more energy than it generates, and it has never been proven to work at scale anywhere in the country. New Orleans people should not carry the cost of those technologies, and they do not fit the council's intention to be aggressive in its clean energy goals. Nuclear energy is not clean, period. That is 2 minutes. Zachary Lang. It is with the utmost urgency that I implore the city of New Orleans to move forward with this mandatory renewable energy policy that would move New Orleans in the direction of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040 and the elimination of fossil fuel use for electricity by 2050. The renewable portfolio standard that is being put out is a step in the right direction to rid our city of its fossil fuel dependence. This RPS would allow for New Orleans to be a leader in the Deep South in renewable energy and could be used as an example moving forward for other cities. I urge the City Council to approve the mandatory RPS over Entergy's preferred voluntary RPS. And the transition to renewable energy, Entergy should not be increasing profits and getting credit for the electrification of certain entities like Sewage and Water Board and the port. It is effectively allowing Entergy to continue to sell dirty energy while getting renewable credits when they are undeserved. This would mean no change to our current unequitable status quo of towering bills and pollution. We cannot allow for Entergy to be the only party benefiting from this arrangement. I also urge a change to the current draft RPS as it includes nuclear energy as a renewable resource. The nuclear energy that we receive here in New Orleans comes from the Grand Gulf plant, which has a horrible track record. Recently, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has stated that Entergy has wrongfully charged customers over $1 billion due to the use of the Grand Gulf nuclear plant, which has malfunctioned and repeatedly been deemed unsafe. This is on top of the fact that nuclear energy creates radioactive waste in its production. Moving forward, the city of New Orleans must accept a mandatory RPS. We as a city are on the front line of climate change, and it is time we started acting like it. Theodore Hilton. We need a real renewable portfolio standard as soon as possible, and this standard must not include dangerous nuclear power. It must also not consider carbon capture and sequestration as an alternative to aggressively reducing fossil fuel combustion in the first place. The technology is expensive, it isn't well tested in the long term, and for it to have an impact, CCS would need to be considered as an amendment to policy that got us to zero carbon emissions already. Jonathan Rhodes, Director of the Mayor's Office of the Utilities for the City of New Orleans. The Mayor's Office shares the Council's goals for climate action and affordable energy. However, we respectfully request that the Council not proceed with the proposed modifications to the final RCPS rules for the following reasons. The proposed modifications essentially remove two important decarbonization tools, namely carbon capture and beneficial electrification. Carbon capture is a tool that can help reduce industrial pollution, as in power plants and water pumping stations. Beneficial electrification simply means replacing fossil fuels with electricity, as in cars, buses, and ships, to reduce overall emissions and energy costs. In facing the climate crisis, we need more tools rather than less. That is why there is a broad consensus locally and among scientists, environmental organizations, and leaders worldwide that a comprehensive approach to clean energy is needed to effectively address climate change. By making these tools more burdensome, we are left to rely on intermittent energy sources that would pose challenges for affordability and grid reliability. On the other hand, a mix of clean energy resources working together with renewables supports the success of renewable energy over the long term, while reducing carbon emissions now. In fact, international studies have found that relying on more than 80% renewables would cause constraints on energy supply. A recent Harvard study came to a similar conclusion, finding that clean energy approaches will cost much less than systems based entirely on renewables. Here in New Orleans, our energy transition will need to deliver decarbonization in places where solar and wind have limited applicability, such as transportation and industry. We need to examine options for beneficial electrification for our transit fleets and carbon capture at facilities like power plants and pumping stations, which are among the highest carbon emitters in the city. Unfortunately, these cleaner energy options would be off the table if the proposed modifications to the RCPS are passed. Locally, there is broad support among government, business, environmental, education. That is 2 minutes. Forrest Bradley Wright. This is a time of unprecedented changes in our environment and technological transformation in how we generate and consume energy. With this renewable and clean portfolio standard and the city's local regulatory authority, New Orleans is uniquely positioned to fully embrace clean, renewable energy. The City Council should show its leadership today by pursuing net zero emissions by 2040 and no fossil fuel by 2050. Arguments by Entergy to water down this commitment should be seen for what they are, a cynical attempt to protect its outdated nuclear and fossil fuel generators, while clinging to outdated business strategies. Let us never forget the deceptive and unethical tactics the utility used while pursuing construction of its fossil fuel plant in New Orleans East. Please put your trust in clean energy and the people of New Orleans who are asking you to give our city a better future. Please put New Orleans on a path to 100% clean energy. Thank you for your consideration. Jolie Benson. I believe I've already read a comment from Ms. Benson. But since I'm not sure, I'll read this one. There are cell phone towers going up without notification to residents or schools that are in the affected area. Cell phone towers, which is an unknown factor to the health of our citizens and children, are being placed with no approval process directly in front of a child's playground is wrong and needs to be looked at. I spent 5 weeks emailing with most members of the city council and nothing even remotely promising is happening. We are concerned for the health of our kids. Please help. Just move the cell phone towers to high traffic areas not near humans. Baton Rouge accomplished this. 10 feet from an elementary school is wrong. Stephen Medina. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stephen Medina, a resident of New Orleans. Since we're losing a football field of our Louisiana coast every 45 minutes, clean, non-toxic, renewable energy is so important. Thank you so much for having it on the table. Please keep us free from nuclear energy and fossil fuels and carbon capture. Replacing one risky, costly, toxic energy source and its storage with another is not the answer. There's plenty of safe, non-toxic, renewable energy sources that are getting more cost-effective every day, especially if we continue improving our infrastructure. Please make the RPS mandatory for our energy company. If I was here the day they hired all the fake people and they still got what they wanted a while later. I was here that day too. Entergy could make it so much easier for us to get renewable energy on our homes and businesses. They have to answer to their stockholders first. These are reasons enough for them never to be given room to wiggle out of anything. That is, the renewable portfolio standard should not be voluntary for our energy company. If we had an infrastructure that allowed all of us to be part of the power grid and incentives that make it easier and more cost-effective for individuals and businesses, we could fill all of our very own big flat roofs in the city with solar and wind. What a great way to save money and save our coastline. Please don't let the RPS get watered down so that we don't end up underwater. Thanks for listening and have a great summer. Grace Morris, representing the Sierra Club. She is not paid to comment, but is paid staff at the Sierra Club. Good morning. The Sierra Club is for a just transition to 100% renewable energy. We stand against Entergy's ongoing exploitation of New Orleans residents and the company's environmental racism. The changes the council has made to the advisor's initial draft resolution are positive steps, and yet for a real change of the status quo, we need economic justice. Entergy continues to rig the model and the math to favor its profits, and with a sentence, this resolution could be the real deal. Nuclear is not clean. New Orleans has an opportunity to lead the state and lead the South, and yet without a true mandate for a transition to 100% renewable energy by 2040, it will fail to new council leaders. It will fall to new council leadership to achieve meaningful change in New Orleans. Council members, that is all of the public comment.
Thank you, Erin. And real quick, Councilmember Glapion was disconnected, and so she wants to get put back into the meeting.
I think she's back in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Erin, for reading all of those comments. Appreciate everyone who submitted comments. And you know, for the few that were in opposition, once again, I think that there's some misinformation being put out there that somehow we are prohibiting Entergy New Orleans to move forward with any type of beneficial electrification projects. That's absolutely not the case. In fact, I'm kind of interested and probably will be requesting to see what type of outreach Entergy New Orleans did to different organizations and businesses to see if the full story of the resolution was told, because like I said, by no means would we prevent these types of projects. If they would be eligible for an RCPS credit, what would need to happen is that they would need to come before the council for approval. That's the only difference. It wouldn't be an automatic credit. They just have to come to the council for a review. So I wanted to make sure that that was made perfectly clear. But as I said before, I am interested to be able to look and review at the type of outreach done by the company to different stakeholders and organizations to just make sure that the full message of what this resolution does was actually portrayed to those who submitted comment. So with that, if there are no additional comments from the dais and we have now completed public comment, I am so excited to make a motion to adopt this 2-year piece of work that we have done on this renewable and clean portfolio standard. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Giarrusso. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Jay, aye. from Councilmember Banks. It looks like we've got, is Councilmember Brossette still on? He may have needed to go.
I think he dropped off, Councilmember.
Okay, gotcha. So that's 4 yays and hearing no nays. And now this moves on to the full council. This is actually on the agenda for the full council tomorrow. So to all of those who are interested in submitting public comment, you can do so online. But I remind you that tomorrow is our first council meeting back in chamber. So anyone who would actually like to be in the chamber to make public comment on this particular item, or really any item on our agenda tomorrow, you are welcome to come to the chamber. I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable in the chamber so that we are actually going to have enough room for social distancing. And we also have additional rooms where you can watch the meeting should there not be enough space in the chamber. And when it is your turn to come into public comment, you'll be called in to be able to make your comment before the council. So with that, it looks like our agenda is complete. And I did remember to approve the minutes this time because I'm notorious for forgetting to do that. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Giarrusso. I'll go ahead and second. Any objection to adjourning? All right, hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, see y'all.